All right, so do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Thank you. I'm Sara. I do a blog called Agony Auti. My main aim is to produce informational videos and to highlight any campaigns that may be of interest for autistic or neurodivergent people.
Great, thank you for introducing yourself. So I want to start by asking you, how did you know you were autistic, and how did your neurodivergent story start out of discovering yourself as neurodivergent?
Okay, so I was diagnosed when I was 27, so almost 9 years ago now. And even though it was a bit of a shock to be diagnosed with autism, it also wasn't, because my whole life I was quite aware that I was quite different in my behaviour, in my emotions, in the way that I thought and played and imagined, in the way that I made friends. And I was constantly being told from the age of a child up until my adulthood that I was weird, different, strange, all the words that you can think of, but not autism. That was a new word to come along, and it was able to replace the weird, strange, all the other nasty things. That word autism, it was an answer finally for me to understand myself, or to begin to understand myself.
So was it like the case that, you were a bit, somewhat surprised with it? Because, like, you were given, like, labels like weird and strange, and I guess, who you were and who you are as being autistic isn't what you make with Sarah's being autistic at the time of before you were getting diagnosed.
So, I mean, my son was diagnosed at a similar time to me, and that enabled for me to digest it. I found it difficult to digest the diagnosis at first, but my son, who is also autistic, he's so similar to me in how he behaves, and the noises he makes, and the sensory seeking, and the squishing, and the squawking, that it became difficult for me to reject autism for myself when it was so apparent with my son as well. But I was relieved to have an answer of my perceived differences.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I guess you must have felt like things coming together for yourself, and like finally understanding who you were. So I guess was it with your son that, like, maybe when he was in school, was it like a teacher who thought he was autistic,
Oh
and
no, that was
then
just
you,
me.
oh right,
I
also I
spotted it
guess,
straight away.
oh very
Yeah.
good. So I guess you're just like, I guess you notice what like an autistic child is, or like a young autistic boy was, and then I guess when you like notice those things in your son, I guess it was piecing together. Well, I actually do all these things, and all these, like, some of these things kind of relate to how I am. Is
That's
it?
it. So my son was only 9 months old, so a baby when
Well,
I first put the word autism to him. Um, I was observing him, and basically my son was what, it's quite a nasty way of looking at things, but they call him delayed milestones. That was the first sign. But what I noticed was how inquisitive and focused and intense he was at 9 months of age, staring at the same thing, spinning the same thing. And it was curiosity, it was intense inquisitiveness, it was intense curiosity. And it's so easy to say, oh, intense is bad. Not necessarily. But at 9 months, I knew my son was different. And at 21 months of age, he was diagnosed autistic. And at first, people wanted us to just see how he grows, see how he develops, but it was very obvious that he had quite profound needs. And my son is considered to be an autistic with profound needs and with learning difficulties too, whereas I'm considered to be a low support need autistic.
yeah, and I guess like. I guess that's something, great that you managed to find out he was autistic at the time you did, because, he was able to, make it so he understood who he was, and able to get the support he was, and as from not getting diagnosed any younger, you weren't offered that privilege, I guess. You must have felt, in a way, sense grateful for being able to offer your son the ability to understand early on who he was.
That's it. That's actually what motivated me to begin the work that I do, was my son and his diagnosis, because the main reason I found it difficult to accept autism was because of how it's written about. It's written about as something that is to be scared of. It's written about as if it was a disease. It was written about as if it was, if you have it, it's like a life-ending condition. So as a 27-year-old, I was like, why on earth would I want that? Why on earth would I be proud of that? So it was a real journey for me to study the medical narrative, put my lived experience and put my son's lived experience, so we could add a bit of humanity back into the medical criteria. So instead of deficit, we got to look at our strengths as well. And we got to be proud.
Yeah.
We got to end up conjuring that culture of being proud of our neurodivergencies. Because when you're diagnosed, no one tells you to be happy about it. No one tells you to be proud about it. They tell you to be worried. They tell you to reevaluate your son and your future. It's a very scary narrative.
Yeah, I kind of sense that from some of the interviews I've been doing. Like some of the guests have been hinting at there is that disability phobia and ableism around that. And as you're saying that kind of was the stigma that you noticed around when your son was diagnosed and when you started to get into looking into diagnosing yourself. And so, it seemed like you always had, a sense of interest about what autism is.
Yeah, since I was 15. I actually tried to write a book when I was 15, so over 20 years ago. And my main character was an autistic person. She was the sister of an autistic brother. And I don't know why, but I was just so obsessed with that difference wasn't deficit, even as a teen. I was trying to show that these people need more compassion and understanding. But I didn't understand what autism was. Even as a 15-year-old, I didn't understand it. All I understood is that these people are different and I'm drawn to that, but I don't know why. And then my diagnosis came about 13 years after that, after me writing that story. And then it fell into place, which was, okay, I'm drawn to autistic people because that's what I am. It's what I've always been. I just never clinically recognized. And this is something I will say for my son. With or without his diagnosis, he's autistic. He does not need a diagnosis to be autistic. He is the most autistic person I've ever met in my life. And I say that with so much love. He doesn't need that label for me to understand his difference. But that label, it is supposed to help with things like accessing education. But I worry that the label will stigmatize him the way it has for me as an adult, in that many non-autistic, non-disabled individuals will assume that we don't have competence, and a lot of our human rights, they begin to slide because of that. So it's a double-edged sword. It's I can be proud about being autistic and I can settle with it, but also there's the worrying revelation that people will use your autism, your difference, your perceived disability. They'll use it against you to block you out from schools, to block you out from employment, to block you out from communal settings. That's what I mean by it's a double-edged sword. And I'm so proud that the community are building that community, that sense of culture, because it really wasn't there when I was a teenager, even when I was diagnosed, but it is there now. It's starting to come about, and that fights against the negativity, and it gives us a space to collectively come together. It gives me hope. It gives me hope that when my son's
Yeah,
older, he'll feel like there are people to
yeah,
go to.
yeah. Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, there is that hope that carries on for and delivers that, and that helps the autistic people feel included and equal in within society. As you were saying that, in terms of like the label and stuff like that, you like saying on the like more medicalised side of things, and how we should be able to see autism and neurodivergency as a social construct and social identity as well. So like not needing that diagnosis to get that support and validation, but if you say that you're autistic, then you kind of believe because you know yourself more than anyone else. And as you were saying that, when you found out by researching and looking into things to get support for your son, then that's the time you noticed you were autistic in yourself. And I guess it was only the case that when you get diagnosis, it's sometimes just to get that support, and I guess it can be quite frustrating then if you have to get that diagnosis as the passport to getting support.
That's it, and I feel like it's a huge false entrapment on behalf of the medical and political community who have the power, because they're saying you need this tick box, you need this diagnosis in order for this pathway of support. But what many autistic advocates and activists are saying is that even with a diagnosis, that pathway for support doesn't exist. And it's different from town to town or city to city, different from location. So we don't have a consistent pathway of support for autistic people. And that's because we don't have any legislation which protects us. Now, we have the Autism Act, which has been recommended to the government, but it's not legislation. It's not, what's the word where they have to do it? Sorry, I forgot.
It's alright.
There's a word where they have to do something. It means that
Mandated,
something like that. So the Autism Act isn't actually, it's guidance. The Autism Act is a guide framework. It's not a legislation one. And until it becomes a legal one, autistic people's human rights are going to continue to suffer. Like, we've had children as young as my child's now 11, institutionalized, taken 70 miles away from their home and locked away in adult mental health units. That's unthinkable, but legally it's plausible, and they can get away with that mistreatment. So I just feel like the more that autistic people collectively are able to get together and are able to say we are different but we are not subhuman, we get to challenge those narratives. And I really believe the challenging of those narratives will help safeguard the autistics of tomorrow and the future.
Yeah, and I was saying it's the importance of having this community to advocate for the rights of the collective community for us, say, autistic, neurodivergent and disabled people. And I guess when you I guess some of the worry comes from when you got language, deficit delays and difficulties, and now you got the spectrum of autism used for functioning labels, and I guess some of that makes you worried about your son and and as I said, it's your with your son's diagnosis that helped you get involved in such space. So, and I guess when you see headlines with the with the issues of as I said, being in mental health or care services that's supposed to be care services, but detention the centres. I guess that's really emotes you and makes you want to drives you further.
It's definitely emotionally charged. There's definitely a sense of panic and urgency with the work that I do, and I've had to really try to calm down with it, because it does feel like do or die for many members of our community. Many members of our community have lost their lives completely unnecessarily. So it is do or die. And I feel like when we have the government and medical professionals shutting doors, shutting pathways in our face, it is do or die. And that's when the community is so important, not only because we get to challenge the status quo, we get to collectively come together. We are more powerful together than we are individual. We are. And they don't want that. They do not want a collective of disabled autistic people getting together and showing our strength united. They don't want that. But another reason that community is so important is because we do make space for people who haven't got the diagnosis. And that is so vital.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? With self-diagnosis, there is a risk of misdiagnosing yourself. There is. However, if you have studied the autistic criteria, if it is something that you have felt is you for years, this isn't a decision you've just made overnight. This is something that you relate to and empathize with. If you relate to it, but yet the diagnosis hasn't been given to you, that's a very dangerous place for many autistics who don't know they're autistic. They just think they're weird, they're broken, they're crazy, and that feeds into terrible mental health issues where they really believe that they're a burden instead of having the answer that they need, which is you're autistic. And there's a whole community here. So I think it's incredible that the autistic community, we make way for those without diagnosis because we understand that the diagnostic pathway is one of power. You're at the mercy of the clinician to give you that diagnosis or not. And we're trying to break away from those power systems. So that's where I love the idea of neurodivergency. Because if a misdiagnosis has occurred, say if you're not autistic, but you believe that you are and you relate to it, within neurodivergency, we've got that landing pillar of you self-diagnose, but you just don't know what it is yet because you've not been given any professional, clear answers. So you're welcome in the neurodivergent umbrella, and autistics are spearheading that. And I think that's a wonderful demonstration of our empathy, of the thing that they say we don't have. We're literally making room for people who don't have an official diagnosis, and we're doing it out of empathy.
Yeah, as I can see from, as you're talking to me now, you come from a strong sense of justice and hyper empathetic, and as you say, it's something that's stigmatized in how people perceive autism, thinking we're hyper empathetic and like that. But we are very empathetic and can be quite hyper empathetic. But we always see it, it's like we express empathy in a different way because we can show emotions in a different way and be more susceptible to masking our emotions, or like experiencing like the confusion of emotions for like alexithymia. So I think if we might not show in the same way as like an holistic person would, but as you say, we're very empathetic, and even though you might not see it, but we are.
That is exactly it. That's exactly it. So due to issues such as alexithymia, which you just said, the difficulty in understanding one's emotion, due to difficulties such as disassociation, which means that we shut down and we may go inwards. So from an outside perspective, it looks like we're not really responding, and it may look like we don't care. It may look like we're being apathetic. What I'm trying to say is that outside observations are horribly wrong. And to deduce that because we emote differently, that we don't have empathy, I think is for me, it's a disgusting flex from the medical community to try and dehumanize us. They're trying to posit that we are humans without the ability or capacity to care for other people. And it's just like, where is this coming from? And it's like, oh, it's because of how we present. And it's why I really believe that the psychiatric model of autism will be completely rewritten or ripped up with the dawn of neuroscience, because neuroscience can show inside the brain. It can show, oh, they're sorting out emotions. Oh, they've shut down. Oh, they're in a survival state. But that doesn't mean that they're not without empathy. What a ridiculous conclusion to jump to. So the psychiatric model is the one that is based on their observations of us, which is very deficit based, and that's why it was a very difficult model for me to accept when I was first diagnosed. I couldn't fathom that they would see me as essentially a psychopath, because that's how they often describe autistic people. When truth be told, autistic people, like you said, are some of the most hyper empathetic people I have ever met. But in order to safeguard ourselves, we have to sometimes turn that empathy off. Neuroscientifically, that's a survival behavior. That's not a non-empathy behavior. And I really do believe the psychiatrists, they've got it so wrong. They've made observations, but they've not explained the root cause or why.
Yeah, as you were saying, I think in terms of what you're saying about the medical and psychiatric, model and lens of autism and what neurodivergency is, I think there's a lot of the fact that it's not led by autistic or disabled neurodivergent people, and I think if you're not having those people in power where they can research and develop resources on autism and actually be the leaders of research, and the medical community that actually looks and reflects on them, you can't get the autistic people's lens on it, and you're perceiving it how a holistic person might see autism, and that's the wrong window of it.
That is 100% it. That's why I'm smiling, because that's it. That's it.
It's alright.
So the theory of general relativity is that we are all relative to each other, which means we all run parallel. None of us, I can never go into Aaron's head. Aaron can never go into my head, Sara's. Even though we have the shared experience of autism, which connects us, we are ultimately, relatively, always alone. But we run side by side. Yeah? So that's what connects us. When you have the power disparity of a therapist looking at an autistic person, what connects us?
What connects us? Oh, yeah, I guess you're asking it as a question, but what
is their observation of us. It's their consumption of us, their observation, and they're doing it from a psychological, scientific, medical lens, one of power, one of prestige, one of authority. We are their subject. We are their mice. And therefore, we are at their mercy that it is them who has a compassionate and empathetic lens. Because we are being observed and digested through their lens. And we run relative to each other with no connectors. So what I mean by this is you can have, and this is often what happened in psychiatry. In psychiatry, they labelled sexuality, homosexuality, lesbianism, being gay. They labelled that as a mental illness, as a mental disorder, because relative to them, they couldn't fathom it because they're straight. They're straight. So they're in their little bubble of straightness, and we're in our little bubble of, like, say, homosexuality. They can't access it. Therefore, they observe it to weaponize it because they don't understand it. It's not their world. They will never be able to connect into that world. They can only observe it. And what has happened is very similar with autistics. You've had non-neurodivergent individuals, or non-autistic people, or autistic people observing us, but because it is that black and white indifference, they can't understand it. So of course we look like a disorder to their order. Of course we look like we are deficit to their proficiency. But it's a false analogy. It's their observation. And the autistic community, by speaking out, we get to put forward our observations of our lived experience and we get to expand on that, but it is exhausting. And I feel quite dismayed that we even have to do this, but we do. We have to do this fight against that medical narrative.
Yeah, I was just saying, it's like autistic people being led to this point of having to do the research and put the work in, are quite fatigued and burnt out by it, because as I say, that if you haven't got the access of support and what you need to thrive in a holistic world as we are in, we can feel that too much burnt out and like snowed over off, like things feeling big on top of our head before we getting started with all this. So as you're saying, it's a lot of work for us going when the world's not just designed for us to thrive in.
That's it. But it gets scary because not only can they make the observations about us, they can then start telling us what is best for us. And they can make decisions about what is in our best interest. And that's when the neurodivergency movement is changing those power structures, because for the first time in a long time, for the last, I'd say 10 years, maybe 5-10 years, autistic people are being asked, what adaptations do we recommend? What do we have to say? And that's quite new. And that comes about from the Disability Act, really, the Nothing About Us Without Us. The Disability Act has only been active for 25 years.
It's like, as you were saying, with identities like, homosexuality, lesbianism, and, different, LGBTQ identities. It's only recently when they started to be seen as a social identity and not something as like medical or like a diagnosis, and as you say, still with transgender and all those type of identities, there's still that stigma of seen as like a problematic and like a medical like issue. And as you say, that kind of still applies to neurodivergent identities. As you're saying, it's not a medical condition, it's not a problem. But as you're saying early on with your concerns about your own son, and with the seeing like the stuff with, as you say, what's supposed to be like care places, but the detention centres for autistic people are kind of abused and all like separated from their families for years on years. I guess it's that same kind of like thing coming back on to what you were saying.
That's it. It's an abuse of power.
Yeah.
It's an abuse of power because they've put themselves, the professionals have put themselves in a position where, quote, they know what's best for us, when actually they don't. They don't know what's best for us. They know how to segregate us and isolate us and to make us worse. They know how to do that. They've been doing that successfully for centuries. But they don't know what's best for us. They know how to control and to subjugate us, to make us small. But they don't know how to empower. They don't know how to build us up. They don't know how to help us lead fulfilling lives where we get to thrive instead of survive. And constantly, we are in the survival state. Because when you have a professional with the power saying your son needs to go in this unit, and we've got a court order, the parents can't fight it. The person at the centre of it certainly can't fight it. So my question is, well, where's the legal help with that? And there isn't any, because it's not a legal legislation. Autism Act is not in legislation. It's a guidance. And until that changes, we won't have the legal representation that we need to fight to keep families in the community instead of institutionalized. So it's about consent. I feel like autistics' consent is ripped off us constantly. And the thing that makes me worry for my son is I know how painful it is to feel isolated, to not be accepted, but to really believe you're a burden. Like in the past, I've had multiple attempts on my life because I honestly believed that I needed to go. I did all the calculations in my head. I was like, I'm the problem here. I'm the issue. So if I take me out, issue solved. That's what I understand today is called suicidal ideation. And that suicidal ideation is often fed to autistic people because we've had lifelong barriers, lifelong seclusions, lifelong isolations. And that, for any human, is so painful to the core. Like, it hurts your nervous system to be alone when you want connection, to share your work when people want you to stay silent because they're weird ideas. It's a painful experience. And I don't want my son growing up with that, but he is. He's growing up with that pain every other week. And I do my best to try and show him that we love him, that we accept him. But it's not enough. My son needs more than parental acceptance. He needs societal acceptance. He needs to believe that he has a place in this world and that he can survive and thrive.
Yeah.
And you can only get that with those communal settings, those communal spaces. So it's about asking the powers that be, because they have the control. It's about asking them to make room for us and to let us in. Let us into the workplaces. Let us into your coffee shops. Let us into the hospitals. Let us in for care, for education, for community. We deserve that. And autistics often, like myself, we can go antisocial. But I do believe it's a safety mechanism. We do it to keep ourselves safe from harm. We don't do it because we don't want a single friend in our life. We do it because we've been so betrayed that to keep ourselves safe, we can slip into isolation. But no human deserves that. And we are human. We're human. And I know it sounds stupid that I even have to say that, but we do, because our human type, we have a word for it, and it's called autism. Our human type is recognised as autistic. And that's why it's so important that the autistic culture takes that word autism and builds it back up with pride. Because we have been given this label now. What do we do with it? Well, we show them. We show them everything they don't know. We show them that without divergences in cognition, they wouldn't have some of the imaginations that they have today, such as the internet, such as the discoveries that we've made in space, such as quantum physics and the connections like Wi-Fi. Like, you wouldn't have it without autistics who shut down and were lost in their head all the time to come up with these wonderful, beautiful ideas of the conscious. And we can tap into our conscious. But I feel that autistics, we've not been taught how to navigate our consciousness.
Yeah, and as you can hint, it's like we never had this space to, feel comfortable in our consciousness and, feel safe. As I was saying, if you're always in survival mode and we no longer feel safe, then it's like a point where, where so many autistic people sadly feel like they can no longer survive. And I was saying, it's like if you don't have the support, don't have the acceptance, and kind of feel alone and don't have many people around you feel they can talk to, because as I say, it's autistic people do find that social struggle of having the ability to know how to open up and who to open up to. As saying, then that can be really hard for autistic people
and dangerous.
Yeah,
we can end up trusting the wrong people. We end up becoming prey to predators who would listen to us, treat us right, and then hurt us. And we are so vulnerable. We are so vulnerable in every single way. We really are. And it hurts my heart. But we have to admit it, because we can't bring strength. We can't build strength around a vulnerability if we don't admit it. Yeah? We
Yes.
can't build strength around the fact that we're vulnerable to manipulation, to coercion, to grooming. And it's like, well, why are we vulnerable? Because we're quite trusting. They call it being literal in the diagnostic criteria. I call it being quite trusting. We want to see the good in people. We wouldn't want to think that they would do the opposite of what they said. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I say, it's like labels of trust and loyalty are, should be like the words, and like are we, like positively seen, as you say, like we seen so negatively, and I guess you went on fighting and being autistic and taking back over our control and power over ourselves in a communal sense of autonomy for autistic people. It's about seeing the words in a positive language, and as I say, for us not to be manipulated. So like, see as like the vulnerability is not our problem, but the problem of somebody else. As I say, it's like we're not the ones who are susceptible to be manipulated. We're the ones who get manipulated. And as you're saying about the power structure, it's important for us to have people who are in charge of like mental health services, NHS, or roles in like government and like parliament, all those powers to like be the ones who can write the laws, like in charge of the health services, to actually design and create things in a societal level that like it has power between what's normally the holistic power to be able to develop things for the wider community that gets us at equality and equity.
Well, that's it. And what you said then was really key about how. So they will often blame the autistic for being gullible, literal, yeah, instead of looking at the person who chose to abuse. Because that's where the blame lies. It doesn't lie with an autistic person not being able to read social cues. It lies at the responsibility of the perpetrator who chose to target that person. And they chose to take advantage of their differences. And there's so much victim blaming upon autistic people and upon disabled people. Society would rather find a way to blame the person in need than the person who actually took advantage of the need. And so, yeah, and I see that cycle of self-blame a lot. But it's not our issue. It's not our fault when travesties have happened to us. But too often, even within a legal system with judges and prosecutors, they will use our autism diagnosis to not look at the crime that's been committed, but to say, oh, we don't have capacity, they're fine. So these are serious crimes that have taken place. So abuse, violence, assault, and they are traumatizing to autistic people. But when people see the autism label, it's like the crime that's been committed or the trauma that's happened doesn't need to be addressed because we're already suffering. We are the suffered. So it's like there's very little protection, and I just don't understand it. I don't. And it's inequality. It's just, it has to be discrimination when you're treated differently for the exact same crime, yet you're not listened to because your autism diagnosis means you have a different perspective on the world. That means we're failing. We're failing autistics everywhere right off the start. Like, how is an autistic person supposed to be able to feel confident with asking for help to get out of a dangerous situation if they're not going to be believed because of the autism diagnosis? It doesn't make sense to me, and that led me to have my own little nervous breakdown, if I'm honest with you, because I was just like, I don't have any hope. I don't have any hope. This makes no sense. And then I had a breakdown. Because I kind of felt like everything I was fighting for, there was no point. But that's not true. That's chronic depression.
Yeah.
It's chronic depression, and it's taken
Yeah.
years to get over that depressive state. But to have my autism diagnosis weaponized against me so bad when I was a victim, that was a shattering, a life-shattering few years for me. That they wouldn't believe what I was saying. They thought that I had misinterpreted the abuse because of, they'd go back to the points in the autism and they'd say, you see things differently, you've got a different world perspective. I'm like, I'm telling you what happened and you keep coming back to the diagnosis instead of the crime. So I felt like I was in a different world. I didn't feel like any of this was real, and it made me really wish I did not have the autism diagnosis, because I did wonder, if I didn't have that label, would they have believed me? And I do remember saying this though to the police. I said to the police, you have made being autistic, you've made that an open season for abusers, because abusers can abuse autistic people and know that there's a loophole within our law, which means that the police are very less likely to believe an autistic victim, let alone make adaptations to collect their statement. It's scary. When we scrape away at the surface, we do not have any legal protection, none. And it is what I want to fight. Before I die, I want to fight, knowing that we have some legal protection in place, where it is a legal obligation of the police force to get autism or disability experts in to help retrieve the statement. Because you've been in a meltdown state, Aaron. What are you going to be like, right, if you've just been the victim of a crime? You're going to be in a huge meltdown. That, to the police, is not okay. Yeah. You're not allowed to be in a meltdown when you're a victim. You're not. Even though we know it makes sense to respond that way, you can't be like that. You can't be crying, you can't be rocking, you can't do any of that, because it's seen as, oh, there's something else here, let's explore the mental illness, instead of what actually happened. And that's what happened. They looked at my head instead of what happened to me. And it to this day, I don't understand it.
And I guess it's that sad thing that that's how autistic people don't feel like we are, able to trust, like authority and listen just to systems. Because, as I say, and like for anybody who's like, as I say, who's less, is labelled as more in low functioning, not labelled like that by society, or like, with like a certain, other disabilities and difficulties, then that can be seen as like a hard issue to get the support and be able to communicate in the things in a way that actually gets them that justice, or be able to get the resources to get in some sort of resolution and the result on outcomes they need. And as I say, with like issues like you were saying about legal aid and legal support, as I say, with years, throughout the years recently, seen like legal aid stripped down on that, and I hope you are able, through your activism and your work, to make see these changes happen.
That's it, because currently as we speak in the UK, there are at least 2 autism barristers or solicitors. So the professionals.
Yes.
2 in the whole of the UK who can represent an autistic person in court with the knowledge of being autism friendly. That's despicable. And for me, it shocks me when authorities come to me and say, why do the autistic community not trust in institutions or in powers or authority? We don't trust because of that huge neglect. The the subjugation, the possibility of being sectioned for being in trauma, no wonder we don't trust. And these institutions have often been the ones that have caused us harm. So of course we don't trust. And I think it's a totally normal behaviour for autistics to withdraw trust from those institutes. I think it's normal. I don't think there's anything abnormal in that at all. But yet they still try to see it as an abnormality. They've tried to frame it as an abnormality when actually it can be completely explained historically. It's an avoidance because of survival. We don't trust them because we don't know if they have our best interests at heart. So why would we go to that institute for help when that institute could actually throw the law or the book at us? And I know that a lot of people will say, well, why do we have to make adaptations? Why do we have to make adaptations with healthcare and law? They do, because they're the ones who segregated us. Back in the 1940s, they segregated people, categorized them. These ones are autistic, these ones are normal. These ones are autistic, these ones are normal. They created this. We did not create this. We never asked for this, but we have it, and we're trying to make the best with what we can. But they created this system, and it is up to them to reharmonize that balance.
As you say, it's like without the accommodations, there's the justice, because there would be no justice otherwise. And then, as you were saying it, you see many people who are autistic who have no trust and faith in the police, and then you then have people who are non-binary or trans in the community, like I was saying, women, LGBTQ, people of colour. Then those people in the community are then more susceptible for miscarriage of justice and all these negativities. And I was saying, this is a desperate issue, and this is something that needs to be immediate focus of what changes we get through and what must be done for disabled people.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I worry that I'm too negative, and but I can't sweep it underneath the carpet, and I wish I could articulate it better and less emotionally, but I appreciate you saying that it's valid to talk about.
Yeah. Well, this is, you were saying your experience, and thing is, you can't not be, mostly invested in it, because this is your experience, and this is something you're really determined to want. This is something I cannot be swept under the rug or be forgotten about, because it's been so many years forgotten about. And as I say, this is a desperate situation where it's a survival thing, and it's one of those things that for many or disabled people, it's something that you can't wait another minute for not seeing this change. So I understand it's something that should be at the top of the list, and it's something urgent that needs to be done.
It really is. I mean, just this morning I got a message from a parent who, she took her 2-year-old, so we're talking about a baby here, a toddler, yeah? She took her 2-year-old to A&E because he has a very nasty chest infection. And this was at the hospital. The staff called security on a 2-year-old for having a meltdown. So let me just say that again. Adult nursing staff called security on a 2-year-old baby, child, toddler for having a meltdown instead of applying the guidelines, because the guidelines, they don't have to do it, but instead of applying the guidelines. So this is the thing. They are scared of us. They are scared of us. They are terrified of our difference. And that is why we are so heavily penalised for it. Because they're scared by the flapping. they're scared by the humming, they're scared by the screaming, they're scared by the headbanging, they're scared of all of it because they see it as a loss of control. And it is, in that moment, a loss of emotional control. But they fear it so much that they punish it instead of treating it with compassion and humanity, which is funnily the thing that will cause the meltdown to subdue.
Yeah.
So they feared a 2-year-old toddler having a meltdown, so they called security. That, for me, is that we internalize that fear. We internalize then that we're the bad thing. We must be the problem. We must be the disruptor. And I think the way to move forward with this, and one of the things I'm trying to look at and teach, is autistic distress. So autistic distress, and how does that present, and what does it mean? And it means that that autistic person is genuinely hurting. They're in pain. They're in psychological and emotional or sensory pain. And that's what all of this is. But that's nothing to be afraid of. The person who's afraid right now is the person in the crisis at the centre of it. And I really hope that we can continue to consult with NHS trusts. And my NHS trust has just released guidance, it's brand new, on how to respond to an autistic person in distress or in crisis. And it's with compassion, it's not with seclusion, it's not with sedation, it's not with intimidation or threat of violence. It's with compassion, space, empathy, adaptation. These things can be done. They can be done. Yeah. And I'm hoping these guidelines one day will become law.
Yeah, as you're saying, it's the simplest thing and the smallest thing you can do is just simply listen and give autistic people the time and space they need, and to be able to, get out of their own distress. Because this is, as I say, it's giving us the space and time, the space to listen to us, and focus on what we need in that moment. Because as from my own experience, like shutdown or meltdown type thing is like an anxiety attack, and because I was first diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, and it's only from my own research that I started understanding how autism affects me. Because if you're going through school yourself, even with a diagnosis, you might feel like you could be one of the only people in class, or unable to know how to say you're autistic, because not feeling internalized ableism, because you don't really talk about it in school, or just have that conversation. And it's then if I did maybe would understand it early on about my autism then, and it as I say, it is fear, anxiety, sometimes can be so excitement overwhelmed with emotion, because the meltdown is based on that emotion, and as you're saying, it's nothing to be feared off, and it's just that important thing that we need to converse. And you were saying about the nurses in the hospital, it's one of the first places you should have support there for autistic people, because that's the first a point of care where you need that support, because that's their job to care, and you should be able to have the resources and information and the training to care for other people.
That's it. That's the way to fight this. Resources, training, and it's essentially it's a political issue. The medical issue becomes a legal issue, becomes a political issue. It's a societal problem, and one that I find quite. If we come back to how the Observer of Psychiatry looked at our autisticness, and they said we don't have empathy. The situation with the 2-year-old in hospital, that shows relative to us, it's them who don't have empathy to us. And I don't understand how they cannot be humanly towards people in genuine crisis. And I really think that if we help autistic people in this area, it will help so many other people who are not autistic, but who are suffering with mental health crises or depression or trauma. If you make access needs for us, you will help the wider population and society, because there is a lack of empathy towards human suffering. And I feel like autistic people are some of the bloody bravest people I know, in that they show and they bear their soul only for it to be punished. But I honestly believe that bearing of their soul is vital for humankind. And I do think that other people, other neuro-kindred, they will benefit from being able to admit, I'm overloaded, I've reached my limit, this is uncomfortable for me, yeah? Because those things are seen as weak in modern day society. Admitting your problems is seen as weak, but we know it's a strength. We know it's a strength. But I honestly do believe that the things that we're asking for help for, helping autistics in crisis, it will help so many neurotypical people too. So it just makes sense to do this. You know, we're not asking for specialised treatment, we're asking for humane treatment.
Yeah, I was just saying early on, you know, about how, like, we invented and spared different things, but, like, now it's, like, being able to look at and how we can, like, use the autistic and neurodivergent lens of the world, and how we, like, see our emotions and empathise what, in terms of well-being and support we need, and how that can apply to other people in needing support. As I say, we can be experiencing burnout, sit-downs and all that. So, like, I'm saying, for many of us, the support of having sometimes not expected to go into like work all the time, you know, have like days where we can take time off our mental health support, and being able to have like time where we're not expected to go socialise and all the time and do things on our terms and our autonomy. And so, like, we've all what we want for ourselves is to have that autonomy, and that can do with people to know in their favour to support their own well-being.
That's it, 100%. Like, I really do believe that us being more open about these issues and asking for help in these areas will help other people. But the autonomy is so important, because we're stripped of consent, we're stripped of being offered the opportunity to make decisions about what's best for us, because ultimately we've been deemed as incapable. We are neurologically different. As it stands today, we are neurologically deficit. As it stands today, we are a neurological disease. That is what we're fighting against. We're fighting against that pathologization of humankind. We're not a disease. Like, how on earth does anyone think that? But homosexuals, they used to believe that they were a disease because it was taught to them. It was told to them, you're not normal, you're not normal. And it's like, okay, then I mustn't be. And it's like, what is normal? Like, let's just take a step back. What is normal? And this persecution of people, it's not okay. We're people, we're humans, and we want what everyone else has, and that's acceptance. But we're not accepted. We are not accepted, and we're fighting for that. We're fighting to be recognised as a normal variant of humanity.
Yeah, and I was just saying, like, about homosexuality, it's only recently that we were able to advance the rights on in our own country of that, because it's only been, like, I think 10 years since they legalised, you know, same-sex marriage and marriage equality in that area. And I was just saying that, you know, with the mental health stuff, you know, there's a narrative about it's okay to not be okay, but it's like we can almost flip the narrative if you're giving people their own control and over, like, their own autonomy, because, as you're saying, if you're in survival mode, to, like, be able to say it's okay not to be okay, but you can have the tools to make it be okay, and be, as you were saying, you know, like, with injustices and, you know, with healthcare not designed for us workplaces, having that ability to have the power to change things like that, I think would make things okay. So, and one thing I wanted to also talk to you about is, if you, like, when you, like, what helps you, like, with yourself being okay, what type of things has helped you, like, with, like, sensory-wise, stimming to calm down, and things of self-care that you have done to, support your own well-being?
So what I've learned, and it's something that I'm trying to teach to autistics, our stimming helps us. It helps us regulate. It helps us to cognitively soothe the storm of thoughts which are cycling around constantly. It helps us to navigate our mind, and it helps us to collect calm. But that stimming, again, is being said is abnormal. I've had people describe me as frightening because of the way I move and talk, and I'm trying to get them, to encourage them to understand that moving in this way is not abnormal. It's social construct, it's abnormal to rock and sway and hum, but from a human, biological, animal sense, it's completely normal. And I think it's so sad that we've been stripped away from our coping mechanisms. So some of my stimming can be harmful, and my challenge has been to displace the stim into stims which don't hurt me. But I will always bite at my fingers. I can't help it. It's always there, yeah? So I'll always bite.
Yeah.
But then the challenge for me is when I'm biting too much, it's to try and displace it. So one of the stims that I taught myself when I had my nervous breakdown and I couldn't work and I couldn't think, I couldn't even wash, I couldn't even feed myself, right? And it lasted for months. So then all I could do some days was come downstairs, watch TV and crochet. But that's enough for me. Let me just see if I can show you it 1 second. So this is a stim. It's the same thing again and again. It's like a bit of thread, and you just do it again and again and again. The same movement again and again and again and again and again. Oh, that's a stim. And it's relaxing, but it's also productive. So what they've taught us about ourselves is a load of shit. It really is. Excuse my language. It is. Because it's like this biting is a stim, but the crochet is a stim. They are both valid. They both have a function. They both aim to soothe, to self-soothe and to regulate and to calm down. One of the stims that I've learned as an adult, which I love, is roller skating. And it's the best because I can spin in one spot and you can like literally spin. And as a little girl, I'd be spinning around all the time and flapping. But now I found a way to do a stim, which is, it protects me. Because people don't see it as a stim. They see it as what do they see it as? Exercise or a hobby.
Yeah.
They see it as a hobby. And many of our stims are hobbies. Yeah? Like, they're so wide reaching. But I think autistic people were blamed so much for those differences instead of encouraged to see where those differences could take us. So if someone said to me, oh, you love spinning, instead of stop, why not find a roundabout? Why not do the roller skating? Find a way to channel the spin. Yeah, find a way to channel the spin. But what's really helped me, apart from stimming, it's going slow. I know this sounds a bit corny, but I've had to slow everything all the way down. Every day I make lists, even if it's 4 tasks, or some days it's 1 task, some days it's 12 tasks. But I have to just balance it, and I have to be kind to myself when I can't complete them all. Because there are some days I can't do any of them. My avoidance will come in, and I don't have a productive day. And those days are really hard because I'm like, oh, I'm rubbish. I'm not a productive member of society. Why can't I just work like everyone else? Yeah, it can get very heavy ahead. But it's about just trying to come back to that place of, well, what is normal? And I'm doing my normal, I'm doing my bit. And as long as I'm trying to look after myself, keep the house warm, feed myself, get myself clean, that's a win. If I've done those things, if I've fed myself, bathed myself, and kept on top of the house, that is a win. And I've had to tell myself that every day, that I'm winning, but really I'm surviving. It's true, I'm surviving. But the point where I can start to share work again, that's where I start to live, because I'm starting to utilize what I'm imagining and put it out there instead of just survival mode. But they're both valid. They're both valid modes. And I just I just have to take it day by day, step by step. And I hate it, I really do, because I just want to produce everything and get out there now, but I'll burn out.
Yeah, I think it's that struggle about being autistic is the burnout, because as you're saying, it sometimes can get in a way of things you wanted to do. As you're saying that, you know, you got like loads of things you probably want to do, but you know, like you just don't have the energy, or like, you know, like the either physical or mental energy to do it, and then that can kind of knock on yourself and, you know, on like your confidence with it. And then, you know, like there are some days where you just need to try to take it slow and slow yourself down, as you say. Stimming does help that, and, you know, like be just like stimming and, you know, finding ways of like safely to do it can, you know, as well to get out of your own head of where you like, you know, like, so kind of working yourself up, or, you know, like a bit depressed answers, it kind of just like kind of slows down your thoughts of it, you know.
Well, that balance, like, sorry, could you repeat the last part of the question? Sorry.
Oh, well, I was just saying now, where kind of, you know, like stimming itself, kind of, you know, you can like calm and kind of reduce the like kind of noise that's going on in your brain, just to kind of, you know, kind of quiet and calm yourself down and keep yourself grounded in that sense. That's what he's hinting
and I
at.
get frustrated because there's some weeks where all I've done is nervous system regulation, and I've not done anything productivity wise. But I've learned that that's what I've, unfortunately, it's what I've needed to sustain myself. But I think the things that I struggle with probably the most, it's being isolated. I don't really have any friends. I'm always just on my own, and that can get very heavy on your head when you don't have the external community that so many autistic people crave. We crave for someone's advice, someone's input. What do you think of this? You know, outside of our own head. And we deserve that. We deserve to be able to connect with other people.
And I think what I was just going to say, I think what can be hard for autistic people and autistic people like myself is, like, you know, like it's very rare you find the community or the autistic neurodivergent community in real life, and you can find it often online, and sometimes you want in real life connection, or like, you know, to, you know, have some face-to-face experience of it. And that's the thing with it. So I think for myself, between the pandemic, that was a kind of big knock on, like, I really end up being less productive, and, you know, that can in itself make myself feel quite lonely. And the thing is, it was like the adjustment of, you know, like when I tried university from like going to sixth form, and you know that affected to the make, because like it's so many changes at once, and like I find if like it's only one change at a time, you know, like it could be more controllable. And the thing is, it's that thing with, like, as I was saying earlier about autonomy, like sometimes we need to be able to slow down as individuals, as autistic people, and it can be quite hard and frustrating if you can't only just do one thing at a time, because
and that's what I feel like I'm in at the moment. And I feel like there's so much good awareness around stimming and things like that, but still don't feel that autistic people have had a conversation about cognitive navigation. So by that I mean, okay, so Aaron, do you ever wake up or in the day and you're flooded with literally about 50 different thoughts and you don't know which one to prioritize, and you can get lost? I can get lost in my head for hours. I don't know about you, but I can. And what I'm trying to say is that can be a scary place when you don't know how to navigate it. But
yeah, I would say, yeah, there are definitely times, like, I would say sometimes, I wouldn't say how often it is, but I know there's definitely, like, times when it can be like that, especially if, like, got, like, a lot of change, or, like, somehow, like, like, being more busy than usual, and, or, like, as I say, big change that just going on, like, as I said, with China University, then, like, that was the change of having multiple things going on, like, new environment, new people, like sorting out support, getting used to all different things. Then I think that's for myself, when in a busier place and all that, that's where it has been a bit like that.
yeah, that's overload then that you're describing.
Yeah.
And often I can get that overload from myself.
Yeah.
So I can be in this house on my own, and all of a sudden I will get that cognitive overload from myself, from thinking of memories, of future plans, of things I need to do, and before I know it, I'm lost in this cognitive soup. And one of the things that I'd really like to do going forward is autistic education for autistic people, which is educating us about our stims, educating us about the way we think and the depths of which we can end up thinking and how to pull ourselves back out. I want to educate ourselves on, basically, I just want to get the diagnostic criteria, and for each nasty point they've put, I just want to rehumanize it. And I've seen so many wonderful autistic advocates doing this anyway, adding humanity back in. But the thing that's helped me is my mum has that. My mum has
Oh, I don't know what's missing.
because it does the song.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally when it's finished anyway. Alright, do you mind if I just quickly get across to the kitchen and get chop water? It'll be a quick second.
That's okay.
Yeah, good. At least doing it for you is like conveniently close to the kitchen for when you need to chop water, Yeah, so as you were saying about like the lessons when you be able to help autistic people with.
Yeah, and it's just so that, because when you're on your own all the time, you can end up listening to the very negative, intrusive thoughts that pop up. And I think the biggest conundrum that I have faced over the last 2 years is I've wished, and I'm so sorry, but I'm going to admit it, I wished with all my heart that I was not autistic. And that's not me. If people saw the work that I did, for me to all of a sudden wish that I wasn't autistic, it was because after what I went through was so bad, after the police didn't want to listen to me because of the autism diagnosis, after having like no friends because of how I behave and my interests are too intense, it made me just really go back to that horrible place, which was, I just wish I wasn't autistic. I wish that I could have a lobotomy and all these awful thoughts. And that's when people like, oh, the biggest killer of autistic people is suicide. I can believe it. We're made to not like ourselves because we don't have any clear pathways of support. So of course we're going to end up wanting to eradicate ourselves because we don't have support for it. And that's what I really believe, that education will help and offer, because I don't want my son to ever, ever, ever experience what I've gone through the last 2 years of wishing he wasn't who he was, you know? And it's like,
Yeah.
but I can say that me wishing I wasn't autistic, that comes from a place of severe harm. That comes from being harmed because of that difference. And that's when I was like,
Yeah.
oh, if I didn't have this, I'd be okay. And it's like, well, I don't know that. But there are days where I wish I didn't have the overload. I wish I wasn't overloaded. I wish I didn't shut down. They're not pleasant states to be in. They're awful.
Yeah.
They're awful. But then there's other days where I'm so grateful that my mind can run 1,000 miles an hour because I'm generating ideas and I'm writing workshops and I'm doing planning. So you can't pick and choose the parts of autism that you love and you don't love. And it's been my job to look at, if I don't love myself for that, why? And it's because shutdown's not productive. Having your mind running at 1,000 miles an hour is productive. So it comes back to the notion of capitalism. And many autistics feel that they are a burden because we don't capitally produce towards society. It's a myth. Capitalism is a myth. It's a function. It's very real, but it's not ornate. It's not biological. It's a man-made construct, capitalism.
Yeah.
And we feel the repercussions of it all the time. We feel it when we live in poverty. We feel it when we can't pay for our bills. We feel it when we can't hold on a job. But we end up internalizing that we're the issue because we can't compete with a man-made construct. And I need to settle with that because that helps me every time where the ideation pops up where, oh, I wish I wasn't this way. I have to really ground into
Yeah. 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 But well, I think thanks for saying that because, autistic people will find that, they've been in a similar experience themselves because, like, as we've been saying, we've like systems not designed for us of having that, like kind of trauma passed on to us from, as we've been saying, like we like can experience abuse, ableism, like bullying, stuff like that, whether that's been for school, like college, through to like, experience with like health and police, to whatever, like justice systems and that, and it's all that amalgamation of stuff within society that, is negatively affecting us. And then, when we see like stuff like, as we've seen, like services being cut down, health services, not as many like people out there to support us because like certain financial cuts, then, then it can make us feel negative in the sense of, we feel like there's not much change being made at the minute. Yeah, and as yeah, I was just saying, it's quite hard to be in because, like, you gotta remind yourself it's, like, not responsible for these things, but I was saying, it's like, without the change for many people, it's like, like, hard to, like, survive then, as you've been saying. Yeah, yeah, well, I'll say, Also, no one person has the answer. As we've been saying, it's not like one single answer that solves it all. Because, as we've been saying, it's changes that can support autistic people to give them the autonomy and start making these changes and start progressing things and moving things forward. And it's the simple act of progressing and moving things forward that you start seeing an answer, a solution. Yeah, 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 because, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And mm, as you saying earlier on, when you suddenly be labelled to have like deficits and delays and all our language, then it does make you worried. And as you were saying then about people in power that may hide their own diagnosis or being neurodivergent or disabled, then I think since like we don't like may not play by the holistic neurotypical rules within society, or how you're supposed to like move on and be rewarded to get upon progress. And I think if you like having to play ball to like a neurotypical ruling, I think that has something to do with that. Yeah, Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 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 Dude. Yeah, definitely to have more hope about it because like as you saying, like you need to be, like more visible and speaking loud about it to actually make action happen. And as you've been, like throughout many years, the activism and work in this community advocating, you've done quite a lot of work, in this field trying to make people more aware of autistic people and acceptance and like actually try to see actions and changes made and like as by doing this podcast it's trying to make the voice heard and it's like when I was chatting to Victoria Ellen actually Aspling as you may have seen on social media we were talking about how like she like can see like when she's like researching a diagnostic criteria of autism and like she's like so I would could change and adapt the rules in that to diagnose people and how it shouldn't be gender specific. So we can see then we got the ideas to make a change. So and I think we do have that hope. Yeah, 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 Oh,